Hello.
It's hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello there.
Welcome back to the Space School Log. Today we'll find out what would have happened had Grandmaster Yoda challenged the Chosen One, Mustafar. Before we begin this video, special thanks to patrons, voice actors, and everyone else a part of my team. Want a chance to win a free lightsaber? Watch the end of the video. I'll tell you exactly how you can win it. Our story begins on Coruscant. Obi-Wan had just seen what his former apprentice had done. He looked at the security recordings and he couldn't believe it. Yoda thought for a moment. Initially, it would make sense for Obi-Wan to fight Anakin, and for him to fight Sidious. But Yoda now believed that it would have to be a show-up, and he would have to stop Anakin himself. He didn't believe Obi-Wan would be able to do it, in his mindset at least not now. Yoda asked if he had any ideas on how he could find Anakin. Obi-Wan stepped forward, saying that Senator Amidala would most likely know where to find Skywalker. Yoda continued by saying that he would be going to find Skywalker alone. Until then, Yoda didn't want Obi-Wan to go anywhere. His job was to stay at the temple and make sure that any fleeing Jedi were redirected. While the message was sent out across the galaxy, there was a chance that multiple Jedi could have not heard it and still try to return to the temple, leaving them to face peril or terror on Coruscant. Obi-Wan thought this made sense, as Yoda told him that he was by no means supposed to try and take on Sidious. Obi-Wan did completely understand this, as he and Yoda walked out into the main hall. Obi-Wan truthfully didn't want to kill Anakin, but he also didn't want Yoda to take on Anakin either. He knew that Anakin was far more powerful than anyone would have guessed. Obi-Wan knew Anakin better than anybody, but who was he to disobey the wisdom of the Council, or Yoda at the very least? Yoda departed from the temple and made his way for Padme's residence. When he arrived, she was very surprised to see him. Yoda apologized for showing up unannounced, and then he asked if he could talk to her. She had no issue with this. Her and Yoda had never had any issues before, and for the most part, they got along really well with each other. Padme sat herself down a little nervously, as Yoda asked if she knew where Anakin Skywalker was. Padme immediately went on defense, as she told Yoda that she hadn't seen Anakin in a while. Yoda wasn't exactly dumb. While he didn't know as much as Kenobi, he certainly had his hunches on Skywalker and Amidala. They had been extremely close ever since his mission to Naboo with her. Not that Yoda would suspect Skywalker of doing it, but Padme being pregnant without being in a relationship certainly gave some hints. Yoda then pulled out a hologram, as he showed Padme that Anakin had done to the inside of the Jedi Temple. Padme watched in horror. She couldn't believe it. There was no reason to believe the words Yoda said, but watching Anakin himself slaughter the younglings broke her heart. The two of them were about to have at the very least one child together, and she watched the father of her child slaughter children. To say the least, it was disheartening. It was heart-wrenching like nothing else. Padme told Yoda that she couldn't bear to watch anymore. Padme admitted that she believed that Anakin told her the previous night. When Anakin came back, he told her that the Jedi had betrayed the Republic when they tried to assassinate the Chancellor. Yoda looked at her and told her that Palpatine was behind everything, including the war. Anakin was a part of his plan, and both Anakin and Palpatine needed to be stopped. Padme agreed. As much as she didn't want to believe what Anakin had done, she had to stop him. The atrocities of the Jedi Temple were not forgivable offenses. Had she not seen them, maybe she could believe that he could have some good in him, but her immediate reaction to what she saw was that Anakin needed to be stopped at all costs. Padme told Yoda that they would leave for Mustafar within the coming hour. Yoda understood, and when the time came, the two of them would depart from Coruscant. Padme told Yoda that she would approach Anakin first, and if she seemed to be in any danger, then he could help her. Yoda wasn't exactly too keen on this idea, but Yoda knew better than to step in front of someone as confident as Padme. She was an unstoppable force, and she wasn't going to take no for an answer. When they arrived on Mustafar, Yoda could feel the seething anger spiraling out of the facility. Yoda looked at Padme as she raised her robes above her head and left the ship. Yoda then watched as she walked down the ship ramp. Yoda got himself into a view and waited as he watched Anakin run up to Padme. She was stiff as a rock, and Anakin was a little taken aback. He came up to hug her, and when she didn't reciprocate it, he stepped back. Anakin asked Padme what was wrong, as Padme just looked at him, locking eyes with him, as she drove her knife into his ribs. Anakin cried out in pain as he lifted his hand up and threw Padme through the air. It wasn't actually intentional, it was entirely a reactionary reaction. Padme was then stopped in midair, as Anakin looked at her float safely back down to the ground. Anakin then looked up, over to the ramp, and there was a small life form standing there. Anakin felt a shriek of chills run down his spine through the thick heat of the Mustafar heat. Anakin stepped back and reached for the knife as he pulled it out of his ribs. He was fearful of Yoda. Anakin was floating on Cloud 9, but nothing would humble him faster than seeing Grand Master Yoda arrive on Mustafar. Anakin asked Yoda what he was doing here. Yoda looked at Padme as he walked down the ramp, in a way to tell Padme to get back inside the ship. Yoda then walked down the rest of the ramp while Anakin tried to sound as tough as he could. Though there was really nothing he could do, Yoda scared the hell out of him. The greatest challenge he'd faced was Sindralic, and that was Sindralic who was not ready to fight Anakin. Yoda was ready, and he was here for the sole purpose of fighting Anakin. Skywalker had no clue that Yoda had been coming. His mind was turning in a whirlwind at this point. Yoda knew that he had to do one thing, as he stepped in front of Skywalker and slammed his cane down into the ground. Anakin had two choices. He had to fight or surrender. Yet Anakin wasn't going to try and surrender. He stepped back. He knew he didn't have a chance at explaining his thought process or giving Yoda a chance to hear him out. So, he ignited his lightsaber. Yoda dropped his cane and pulled out his lightsaber with the Force. Anakin charged Yoda, and before he could ignite his lightsaber, he leapt over Anakin and ignited it. Anakin turned around and jabbed his lightsaber forward. Yoda blocked it, and used his strength to keep himself on his feet. Anakin was incredibly powerful as a duelist. It was no wonder he had just killed Dooku a couple days before. Anakin swung around, and Yoda jumped over the strike as he smacked blades with Skywalker again. Anakin brought his blade around again as Yoda threw his hand up and held the blade in midair with the Force. Yoda threw the blade as Anakin spun back around and blocked a strike by Yoda. Green and blue collided between Grand Master and the Chosen One. Anakin thrusted forward and Yoda flipped back. Anakin then stormed forward as he swung violently with ferocity and speed. Yoda went on the back pedal as he neared the ledge of the platform. Yoda noticed this as he leapt back over Skywalker, narrowly avoiding being cut in half. Yoda landed and then went on the aggressive, pushing Anakin back. For Anakin, he was used to being on the offensive, and now he was on retreat. He jumped down a couple of steps and blocked up as he looked up in the air as Yoda flew down at him. Anakin backed up as he backed every single strike that came from Yoda. The Grand Master didn't hold back as the two of them carried their combat into close quarters. This could be life or death for Yoda. Close quarter combat could work in Yoda's favor, but it could also be awful for him. It was just a matter of how he conducted himself in this environment. Yoda leapt off the wall and then he threw his hand forward, throwing Anakin into the adjacent wall. Anakin continued to move at Yoda, as Skywalker got back onto his feet just in time to combat the Grand Master. Anakin turned the tables, pressing forward an aggressive display of power against the Grand Master. The hallways were filled with cuts in the walls as the two of them pushed the other back. They moved into the hallways, destroying lights and then through doors. Yoda found himself on top of a table in the middle of the room. He took a look around and noticed all the dead bodies. The bodies of the Separatist leaders turned into younglings before his very own eyes, and the floors were filled with the carpets that lined the Jedi Temple. Yoda closed his eyes to remove this memory, and then looked at Anakin, telling him that he couldn't believe what he had become. Anakin stepped forward, telling Yoda that he was a product of Yoda's creation. This was all because of him. Yoda responded quickly, reminding Skywalker that he gave him Ahsoka. All he ever wanted for Anakin was for him to be happy. It may have not come off as such, but it was his true intention. Skywalker stopped, and then he raised his blade. Yoda responded by lunging forward. The two of them fought in the middle of the room. Yoda continued his aggressive attack against Skywalker, and then within a moment, he was smacked back by a parry by Anakin. It was such a powerful strike against Yoda's lightsaber that he was thrown from his feet. Anakin stepped forward, ready to kill Yoda, almost in a similar style to which Dooku killed Yaddle. All of a sudden, the systems on the panel started to beep. It was a ship. Anakin stepped forward and looked at it. Yoda, with the time, escaped away from the fight, getting inside of a ventilation shaft to take a breather. He was winded from this combat. Anakin noted that the ship coming was his master. Anakin grinned as he looked for Yoda and then realized he was missing. He looked around and decided to go, to greet his master. When he got outside, he saw shock troopers storming inside of Padme's vessel. But Anakin was very defensive of Padme even after she tried to kill him. Anakin genuinely believed that Yoda had corrupted Padme, and the decision was not hers. He was completely out of his mind, and when the shock troopers brought Padme out of the ship, Anakin's rage shot through the atmosphere. Palpatine demanded that the troopers let her go, and then immediately they dropped Padme on her back. She cried out in pain, and then Anakin stepped forward and ignited his lightsaber. Sidious didn't care for this too much. He knew this wasn't a direct threat to him, but it was the fact that Anakin had no issue to standing up to him over Padme. Sidious had two choices here. He could either kill the clones, or he could punish Skywalker for what he had just done. The choice was a little bit more difficult than he'd like, because Sidious promised Anakin a life so much more than that of a Jedi. Before Sidious could make a decision, a starship landed. Anakin looked over as a robed man got out of the ship. Padme looked over and noticed it was Obi-Wan Kenobi. His robes dipped to the ground as he looked at Padme and asked if she was okay. She nodded her head and then looked back to Anakin, whose piercing yellow eyes cut through the smog of the platforms. Obi-Wan stepped forward and dropped his robes. Sidious called out. He told Anakin to kill Kenobi. Padme then called out, telling Anakin that if he truly loved her, then he wouldn't listen to such a vile man. Sidious's eyes looked down at Padme. Obi-Wan noticed this as he crept forward towards her. Anakin looked at Padme and then back to Sidious. Anakin told Padme he would do it because he needed to save her. Padme stood up. She told Anakin that he'd lost his mind. There was nothing wrong with her. Everything was just a made-up lie. Anakin snapped back, telling her that these visions happened before his mother's death, and he didn't want the same thing to happen to her. Sidious stood in the background with an evil grin, watching Anakin fall deeper and deeper into his own lies. Padme told Anakin that if he fought Obi-Wan, there would be nothing left for him if he finished the battle alive. Obi-Wan then saw Sidious raise his hands. Kenobi bolted forward as Anakin ignited his lightsaber. Obi-Wan pushed Padme behind him, keeping her up as he ignited his lightsaber to block the lightning raining out of Palpatine's hands. Anakin stood in shock. He looked at Obi-Wan and then back to Palpatine. The choice to make again. The Jedi or the Sith. Obi-Wan was holding his own, but Palpatine's lightning was so incredibly strong. As Obi-Wan held his own, Yoda came out of nowhere and cut off Anakin's hand, the one that was holding his lightsaber, and throwing his own lightsaber at Palpatine. Anakin cried out in agony as his forearm and lightsaber dropped to the ground. Sidious tried to stop the lightsaber coming at him, but it was far too late. Obi-Wan reeled from the lightning as he turned around to make sure Padme was okay, and she was. The few clone troopers on the platform were beyond confused, but they jumped into action shortly thereafter, costing them their own lives. Obi-Wan and Yoda then stood side by side as they looked at Anakin with their lightsabers out. Obi-Wan pulled Anakin's blade with the Force and held it in his hands. Padme stood behind them as she looked at Anakin with disgust. She walked up to Obi-Wan and whispered into his ears to do whatever he wanted with Anakin. He didn't deserve the life he wanted. He was an animal, and should be treated with less regard. As she walked up the ramp, abandoning Anakin, he looked at the ground with shame. Yoda and Obi-Wan led Anakin into the shuttle, of which would be taken back to Coruscant. Obi-Wan and Yoda would take Anakin to carbon freezing chambers inside of the Jedi Temple, freezing him alive for the rest of time. While Padme, on the other hand, would have the fortune of giving birth inside of the Coruscant upper-class medical facility. It would be a perfect birth, with no issues at all. While Padme's disregard for Anakin could seem out of her persona, after watching Anakin do what he did to the children inside of the temple, there was no coming back. The only thing she wanted to do was protect Obi-Wan from any fight he didn't want to fight. The galaxy was a bit of disarray. Of course, how could it not be? The Jedi were essentially gone, and so were the Sith. Maul was still out in the galaxy, but he was a worry for another time. Padme would have to attend politics of the Empire, a gradual process that would see much reform in the coming months. Obi-Wan would stay close to Padme and help her with Luke and Leia when he could. Anakin's carbonate freezing chamber would be buried away, to never be found or discovered again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our short story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Icy Raptor, Apollo, Mad Manor Studios, Anakin003, and Gort for supporting the channel. List tells likes this video. I got a bunch of videos coming out this week. If you want to see what if, let me know below. Or comments on Twitch service. Check out the Twitch community Discord and Patreon to support me in other ways. And let's talk about our story. After I tell you about how you can win a free lightsaber, go down below. You hit the subscribe button. You go to the dock, you write your name on the dock, and if you win, I will give away lightsabers in video. I don't do it in the comment section. We give away lightsabers for 50,000 subscribers. So smash that subscribe button. The person in the comment section is a scammer. I've done everything I can, but YouTube doesn't protect creators for whichever reason. And talk about the story. So, I'm probably going to get plays. This is a really short story, but I've been doing a lot of Revenge of the Sith type stories, and there's only so much I can do with the ending. I just can. And one thing I want to touch upon is, first, Yoda's going to lose to Anakin. I don't think Yoda would beat Anakin. I truly don't. Yoda would just get worn out. I think it would be a stalemate, but Yoda would get worn out against Anakin. Anakin on Mustafar is just a different animal, and while I believe that Yoda has the patience, he doesn't have the energy to keep up with Anakin. I think that's the difference. Obi-Wan has the energy to keep up with Anakin. He also knows Anakin much better than anybody else, which allows him to achieve victory. He knows Anakin, and he has the patience to fight Anakin and the energy to do so. And I think that's something that I think Yoda would struggle with. I think think Yoda wouldn't be able to beat Anakin. And originally I was going to have Yoda get killed by Anakin in the same kind of poetic way that Dooku killed Yaddle, but I decided against that for the ending that I chose. This had a lot of rewrites in it. Sidious and Obi-Wan coming to Mustafar more or less was just Obi-Wan getting hearing over comlink, over clone chatter, whatnot, that Palpatine was going to Coruscant. Considering there are so many dead clones at the Jedi Temple, how could he not hear something go over clone chatter? And the original endings were much different than this. I feel like this one was kind of in the middle, not like saying mediocre, I'm saying in the middle of what was originally supposed to happen. It was kind of a combination of everything. I'm rather happy with how it ended. Instead of killing Anakin or having him come back, I just froze him. That was the biggest thing I struggled with, was deciding what I wanted to do with Anakin. I didn't want him to have a redemption story. I feel like he didn't deserve the redemption story in the story, so I kind of let that one go. But overall, I hope you all enjoyed this short story. I know it's rather short, but I am trying to pump out videos for you guys, so I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.
It's gonna